very, very few subjects in the world of fishing have caused as much argument and strife and divisiveness as what kind of fishing line to use. And of those fishing lines, none of them have caused the amount of disagreements that monofilament has. So today, it's going to be a long episode, but it's going to be worth watching the entirety of the episode because I'm going to dispel once and for all most of the myths surrounding nylon monofilaments. And then hopefully, in doing so, we'll let you learn how to pick out the best monofilament for you. And that way, when somebody tells you you should be using this kind instead of this kind, you can know without having to argue back with them that you have done the necessary research and you have picked the best line for the application that you are fishing, and you can fish it with confidence. So let's get the first and foremost out of the way, right? Everybody refers to mono as mono, but it's a misnomer, right? Technically speaking, any line that is made out of a single strand is monofilament. That includes copolymers, fluorocarbon, and nylon. However, in the world of fishing, anytime you hear somebody refer to mono, what they're really referring to is nylon monofilament. So they're not all created equal, okay? There's a lot of misconceptions surrounding nylon monos, and everybody is really super brand specific, and there's a reason why, and that has been engineered in such a way to get people to be brand loyal through a lot of misdirection and misinformation, frankly. So I'm going to help you dispel all of this in this one episode. So let's get it out of the way. It was invented by DuPont. So if you're looking for the original brand of monofilament that was made by the DuPont Corporation, it is this. Stren was the first one that was made. Just FYI, if you really want to be super old school about it, use Stren, okay? However, when you're buying monofilament, the biggest mistake that I see people make, especially here in the States, this does not apply to Japan and European countries, and I'll explain that in 1 second. The biggest mistake that people make in the United States is buying fishing line, monofilament nylon line, based upon what the pound test says on the label. That is not applicable here in the United States. And one of the biggest offenders happens to be one of my favorite fishing lines. You should be buying fishing line based on the diameter of the line, not what the label says, and here is why. This 20-pound Berkley Trilene Big Game is not a 20-pound line. This is actually more like 40 or 42-pound line. So why does Berkley do that? Why don't they just label their 20-pound monofilament as 42-pound? Very, very simple. And this is how these brands deceive you into becoming loyal to their brands. And to be truth be told, I do it too, because I'm always bragging about the 20-pound nylon Berkley Big Game and how I pull in 40, 50, 60, 70-pound catfish on this line. So why do they do it? Simple. Because you or me go out and buy a 20-pound spool of Berkley Trilene Big Game and then proceed to pull in a 60-pound catfish. The next thing you think to yourself is, man, this 20-pound mono really hauls it. This is some tough line. Would a 20-pound monofilament haul in that same fish? Probably. But a 40-pound mono will do it no problem. You just crank down on it and yank those fish in one after the other and not have to worry about breaking your line on a fish that weighs 3 times more than your monofilament is actually rated or what it says on the label. So the reason I say this is because in Europe and Japan, they have the NFTTA charter. Okay, that's what it's called, the NFTTA charter, which is a charter amongst 35 manufacturers that specifies the process and how they have to label their nylon monofilaments. And it's set to an industry standard that is scientifically tested, and it goes by diameter. Okay? So, diameter of the line is, when it comes to monofilament or nylon, I'm just going to keep saying mono when I mean nylon, the primary thing that differentiates the pound test from one to the other is the line diameter. Sure, there are other formulations and ways of tempering it or annealing it that can make it a little tougher and stuff, but that's the overall difference between nylon monos and break strengths is the diameter, which is why I keep saying you should buy your nylon mono by diameter and not what it says on the label as far as break strength, because that can be anything they want. They can literally order, if they wanted to, in theory, they could order a piece of nylon mono that's this big around and label it 8 pound, okay, in the United States. That wouldn't fly in Japan and Europe, but they can do it here. So they constantly underrate their lines and then slap a label on it, so that way when you go fish with that 4 pound line and catch a 9 pound bass on it and just, boat flip it into the deck of your boat, you will be thinking in the back of your mind that how strong this 4 pound monofilament is. And it's certainly better than Brand X over here, because the last time I did that with Brand X, it broke. The reason is because that 4 pound mono is mislabeled. It's actually an 8 pound. Okay, so I have several examples here sitting in front of me to prove what I'm saying. Okay, now I'll go over briefly things such as tempering or annealing of the line, which does change its physical characteristics a little bit, but it doesn't change the break strength of the line. Okay, so the two that I want to show are probably the two that cause the most arguments on the internet. Okay, Trilene XL, Trilene XT. Everybody says, oh, if you want the smooth casting one, you get the XL. If you want the tough abrasion resistant one, you get the XT. So both of these lines are in 6 pound test. Okay, they're both rated at 2.7 kilograms if you guys happen to be watching this in a European standard country. But I want you to look really close. I'm going to put this up to the camera right here at the bottom where the diameter of the line is listed. So I'm going to show this really close. Look at that, guys. The primary difference between these two lines is nothing more than the XT is a little bigger. Okay? Trilene and Berkley line, especially the ones with the Trilene label, are tempered nylon. Okay? That's a special heat treating process that they use to make the surface of the line a little bit tougher. Obviously, this one is treated a little bit more, I guess is the best way to put it, for the sake of brevity for the channel. But the main difference between these two lines is not the formulation of the line, it's the diameter of the line. So of course, a line that's a little bigger is going to be a little more tough and abrasion resistant than one that is thinner. The one that is thinner is going to be a little more limp and pliable. That makes sense, right? Because that's actually what's happening. So you guys have seen me brag before about when I like a 6 pound line that's pretty limp, I tend to go with P-Line CX. I do use it a lot when I'm brim fishing. The knot strength and stuff like that isn't too great. But here we go. Look at the line diameters on these. Now you understand why line diameter is a thing. This is smaller than even this. So why would it be that they're labeled such a way? It's a whole bunch of mental trickery, right? And I wanted to show you guys this too. This is the Mr. Crappie that I like so much. There you go, side-by-side specs. They're labeled like this because of the same reason that people argue about it online. Everybody thinks if you go out and buy a box of this, you're getting an extra super tough line that's a 6 pound rated line. You're not. You're not buying a 6 pound line at all. This is more like 8 pound, okay? This is actually closer to about 7 pound, okay? So when you look at it, this is actually closer to true weight. This one is further away, but everybody perceives these lines as both 6 pound with their individual benefits. This one being softer, this one being tougher. In reality, what it is this one's thicker than this one, so this one is tougher and stiffer. There you go. So I wanted to show you guys the most popular line size for crappie fishing anyway is 4 pound. So here I have two lines, and it's in millimeters on these, but these are both lines that are very commonly available. Again, look at the size specs, okay? And I've talked about how manageable this and this is side by side, okay? In fact, this is my new small line mono. Reason being is it's super manageable. And the reason for that is it's closer to the actual 4 pound spec as 4 pound spec line. So it's a smaller diameter line. It's not going to hold the 6 pounds like this will, but because it's not as thick as that is, it's super manageable. So when it comes to monofilament lines, once and for all, guys, pick your line by diameter. You can actually go on Google and look up the NFTTA specs, and then that will tell you the true breaking strength of nylon monofilaments by diameter. And that is how you should be choosing your lines. I have that on my phone. I have it saved as a screenshot, and when I buy monofilament lines, that is what I go by. I don't go by what the label says on here, because they can slap anything they want onto this label as far as breaking strength goes, and that's what you think it is. Go by the NFTTA standards, and that will tell you what pound line you actually are using. Like I said, this Berkley Trilene Big Game is probably the worst offender as far as mislabeling their lines. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. Nothing that says Big Game on it is actually NFTTA standard. None of it is. It's always like double, okay? The line diameter is huge. It's super tough. It's very, very hard annealed nylon, but because of that, people buy it. I buy it. I swear by it, because it's super, super tough to break this line, because it's not a 20-pound line. It's a 40-pound line, right? So let's go over a couple other things that are kind of like tangential discussions regarding nylon monofilament, such as the tempering and formulations. A lot of companies say that they have a unique formulation to their line that makes it more supple, more limp, and less prone to memory. Okay? The answer to that is that true? And the answer is a little. Okay? There's only so much you can do with nylon monofilament to maintain its solid state. Okay? It's a polymer, which means it consists of a long chain of hydrocarbon molecules. Okay? I won't get too much into the sciencey stuff, but a polymer is a polymer. Now, you can fill more of that with softening resins and stuff like that to make the line a little more pliable, but when you start doing that, you cut down on the break strengths and stuff. As far as 100% pure nylon monofilament goes, the strength is going to be pretty uniform throughout the lineup of different manufacturers, and it's called, the specific standard for that is called the denier strength. Okay? Everybody refers to it as break strength, but when people talk about the strength of a nylon monofilament line, what you're really referring to is denier, okay? And that measures the amount of linear stress that can be placed onto a line or a material before it fractures, okay? So things like tempering, which is a heat treating process that a lot of lines use, like Trilene does it, a lot of other lines do it. Stren uses it as well. So does Suffix, by the way. They heat treat it in such a way that it makes the surface layer of that line a little bit harder. Okay? But with nylon monofilaments, it's always a balancing act. You can have tougher, harder line, or you can have softer, more manageable line, but you can't have both. Okay? Any line that says that is super, super manageable and super tough is lying to you, because you cannot have that with nylon. That's why other lines were invented, like braid, because you cannot have a nylon monofilament line that is tough and manageable at the same time. Also, there is no such thing as a nylon monofilament line that will not develop memory. Period. It's the nature of the material that nylon is, that it will take a set, or will start molding itself to the shape that you have it fit around, and there's no way around this. Okay, a lot of lines say that they lay it onto the spool in such a way that it prevents line memory and stuff like that. I'm telling you now, guys, it's all BS. The difference is they're winding it around a big spool, so that way when you put it on a little spool, it doesn't seem like there's a whole bunch of memory. But if you leave it on that little spool, or even on that big spool for a period of time, especially in a house or in a boat where it gets warm, stuff like that, it will develop memory. There is no way around this for nylon monofilament except to not put your line on your reel until shortly before you're going to be using it to go fishing, and then leaving it on there for a few weeks. My personal preference is I leave monofilament line on my reels for a maximum of 4 weeks, and then whether I use it or not, I take it off, and I do not respool my reel until the day before I'm going back out again. That is the best way to ensure your nylon monofilaments develop as little memory as possible, because by the nature of monofilament, you're going to have memory. Okay, it's a polymer. That's what it does. It adheres to a certain shape. That's how come they can extrude it into round strands, is because it holds a shape, right? Under heat and pressure. So that's how it's done. So which monofilament line is best for you? Well, the cop out answer to that would be, well, go pick the one that you like and use that one, and tell people to go pound sand if they don't like it. The true answer to this is the one that fits the circumstances that you are fishing under, okay? Which also sounds like a cop out answer, but is not. What I mean by this is, if you look at the NFTTA standards, okay, and you're going to be catching 10-pound fish, it's good to go a little overmatch to like a 12-pound, but do you need to buy an American line 12-pound that's actually an 18 or 16-pound line? No, you do not. And some people say, well, it's so I can horse them out of the weeds. You're not going to find a hydrilla that is tougher than a 10-pound bass, okay? You're not. And this whole thing about braids sawing through vegetation, I've done a hell of a lot of fishing in my whole life, and I've never had a piece of braid saw through anything, okay? If anything, it kind of bends it around it, so like you pull it in a line and it's like wrapped around your line like this as you're yanking it in without breaking. So take that with a grain of salt. Go to the NFTTA table and decide based on those diameters which would be the most appropriate for you. Now, when I go crappie fishing or bluegill fishing, I'm very rarely going to catch a fish that weighs more than 2 pounds, okay? So logic would dictate that I'd want a 2-pound or 3-pound monofilament. Unfortunately, those are kind of rare here, and I don't always have access to 2-pound monofilament. So I buy and have sought out purposely the line that is closest to that I could find, which is this. And it's the closest thing that's readily available to me, which is another key. Readily available, because import fees and stuff like that, ordering NFTTA lines from like Europe and Japan can get quite expensive. So the closest thing that I found to true spec line in the United States is the Mr. Crappie in the 4-pound, which is really close to a 4-pound. Break strength on it was like 4 3/4, almost 5. So, you know, it's pretty close. But because of that, it's super manageable and it doesn't develop memory quite as quickly. And it handles really well. And it has really good casting distance because it's a thin, slick line. So all those things come into play. So the answer to all this is find the monofilament that you like the best, okay, if you're a brand name person. Then buy based on the diameter of the line instead of what the pound test says, and you'll have a better experience with fishing. I promise you this. So if you actually want a 20-pound Berkley Trilene big game, this is the truth, you're going to have to buy like the 10-pound Berkley Trilene big game, okay? Go by the specs. You'll have much more fun fishing. You'll be able to cast further. You'll have a more accurate line. And that is the way to properly buy monofilament. Ignore these labels from now on, guys. It's a bunch of mental trickery to get you think that, oh, brand X's 4-pound just can't be broken, whereas brand Y's 4-pound breaks under 2 pounds of pressure. In reality, what happens is brand Y is actually really, truly rated for 4, and brand X is more like an 8-pound line, okay? That's why manufacturers do it. So pay attention to that next time you go buy monofilament. If you really want a 4-pound line, buy 4-pound line. If you want a 40-pound line, buy 40-pound line. In my case, it's labeled as 20 and I keep buying it, but I know that this is closer to like a 40-pound line, but it's what I use because it's the kind of fishing that I want to do. That's the example that I'm trying to set for you guys. It's not 20-pound. It's not. It's more like 40. But I keep using it despite the fact that it's mislabeled because I know it's more like 40 and I'm catching tough fish and I'm using it for saltwater fishing and stuff like that recently, like you saw in the video, where I'm catching fish that weigh more than your average size catfish or anything like that. Or I'm using it around the riprap rocks and stuff like that I was fishing right around, where I kept having to cut sections of my line off because it was getting basically chewed up by the rocks. So the thicker diameter monofilament works better in those circumstances. You're brim fishing or fishing bass in open water where there's not that much structure for your line to be abraded, you can go more true spec as far as diameter goes and get the benefits of that thinner line without having too much of an overkill. You'll fit more line on your reel, it'll cast further, it'll be smoother, it'll develop less memory. All of those benefits come from having a thinner line than overrated line that has a not true spec pound breakage on the label. So I hope this helps you guys, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you get something out of this information, because this is how I do things when I pick out my lines to go fishing, and it's how you should be doing it as well. Tight lines, my friends.